Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. July ended up being a really great reading month. I did a lot of things for Jane Austen July and really enjoyed it. I also ended up getting COVID halfway through the month, which even though it exhausted me, it did leave me a little extra time to get some books done, which was really nice. And yeah, we'll just get right into the book, starting with Persuasion by Jane Austen, which I listened to at the beginning of the month and really enjoyed. This was a reread for me. I discovered on this reread that I feel like this is actually my least favorite Jane Austen. Still love it, still at least a 4 stars, really enjoy a lot of aspects of it. Jane Austen's writing is just always wonderful to read and experience. I do really like Anne Elliot, though I don't feel like she's as well explored. I think just the length of this book is to its detriment, and who knows, maybe Jane Austen would have made this book longer if she had been given more time. This is one that was published after her death, so it's very possible she could have intended to write a bit more or develop things a little bit more throughout it, who knows. But because of its length, I feel like it really suffers as far as character development goes, and I feel like Anne Elliot is the one we get to know the best, and I do really like her. And I would say if I were to rank the Jane Austen heroines, which I'll probably do next in a video next year, she wouldn't necessarily be at the bottom, but I do feel like I wish we could get to know her a little bit better. I also feel very similarly about Captain Wentworth. In fact, for him, he is a little bit lower down on my list as far as Jane Austen heroes, because I just don't really feel like I get to know him. Like, his only role is to be Anne's love interest, and I don't feel like we super get to know him much outside of that. Additionally, I don't think we get to know the side characters, and I think that's my biggest issue with this book, is I feel like the side characters do not stand out nearly as much as other side characters in other novels do. And that's part of what I really love about Jane Austen, is exploring the side characters, their dynamics, and I just feel like I said, there's just not as much development in this one. That all being said, I still find the humor charming and fun. There are definitely a few scenes that are memorable for me in this. I did also watch the new adaptation of Persuasion on Netflix, and like many other people, I thought it was really unfortunate. I'm not one that, like, I love the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, and it's probably my favorite adaptation of that I've seen. I also really like the 2020 or 2019, that Emma adaptation that came out a few years ago. I really liked that. I know a lot of other people really didn't for various reasons, so I'm not necessarily one that's a purist. And in fact, I feel like the adaptation of this, as far as plot beats go, it got everything pretty much correct. What was wrong was all the characters and the language used, the dress. It just didn't even feel like I was watching a Regency romance. And part of the charm of Jane Austen and watching adaptations of Jane Austen is being taken back to that time period. But in this, the language and clothing did not feel Regency at all. It just felt like it was a very modern story that just happened to have Regency-esque clothing, and a few things they said maybe were a little bit more Regency-esque, but not all that much. And I do really wish that filmmakers would learn to respect more introverted, quiet characters in books like this, because I feel like it's so common for them to try to make them more like Lizzie Bennet or Emma, which those are great characters, but not every character needs to be that way. And I just felt like it was sad that they didn't showcase Anne Elliot in her mature and more introverted nature. For whatever reason, they felt like that wasn't worthy to be shown on screen in a proper way, and I just think that's unfortunate. So anyway, that all aside, love this book. The audiobook was incredible, and I'm excited that I have finally completed all six of Jane Austen's full-length novels, my reread of them for my Jane Austen book club that I've been doing over the past year, and we'll actually be having the meeting on it tonight as I am talking about this, so as I'm filming this. So anyway, this was great, and let's move on to the next book. Next, I actually had a DNF, which was unfortunate, but it is one that I do intend to come back to in the future, and that is Leer Wife by JR Thorp. I DNF'd this because the language in it was just dense enough and kind of stream of consciousness in a way that was similar in some ways, at least in my mind, to Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And because of that, it just was not, I had recently, if you don't know, I recently read the full Wolf Hall, Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel, and it's not necessarily an easy read. And so when this was similar to that, after I had just finished that, I just feel like it was not a good time for it. Additionally, I was kind of bored, honestly, because I got like 60 pages in and I still didn't really know what the point of this story was beyond being about King Lear's wife. So yeah, unfortunately, I decided to DNF this, but like I said, I will be attempting it again sometime in the future when I feel like I'm more in the mood for it. Next, I finished a nonfiction, and that was Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. I did half or a little bit of physical reading for this, and then I listened to the audiobook for the rest. This was such a great listen while I was ill and I was doing some embroidery and cross-stitching, and it was just a very relaxing thing to do while I was sick. As you can probably guess, this is a biography of Jane Austen. Specifically, it's a biography of her that is organized based on homes that she lived in or experienced throughout her life. I have never read a biography of Jane Austen or really done much research on her life, so this was really an introduction for me, and I felt like it did a good job of showing me the different sides of Jane Austen and her family. I really liked the introduction to this that Lucy Worsley gave, explaining that because there's so much that we don't know about Jane Austen's personal feelings about things and who she was personality-wise, really. Many biographers tend to create her in an image that appeals to them as far as they can, still while maintaining factual recognition and understanding. And so I liked her introduction where it explained that, and explained that she's going to share the facts, but she also is going to share kind of her idea of Jane Austen, and based on her research, how she pictures Jane Austen and her personality. And it was just a charming, like, love of Jane Austen sort of letter almost. And I really appreciated that. This is the second book I've read by Lucy Worsley in general, but this year as well. And I do love how readable and engaging her writing style is for nonfiction. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, although this month I did end up reading two, which we'll get to the second one in a bit. But anyway, recently I have been wanting to read more nonfiction, get into it more, because I have developed more of an appreciation for it. But sometimes nonfiction can be dry, and I just feel like Lucy Worsley does a great job of keeping it away from being dry and keeping it interesting. So really loved this. Probably a favorite of the year, honestly. Then while I was still sick, I ended up finishing Roach Rosewood by Ashtyn Newbold. I've mentioned before, Ashtyn Newbold is actually a friend of mine. This is the final book of hers that I own personally that I had not read. It has been years. I'm a terrible friend, but to be fair, this isn't necessarily the genre that I tend to reach for most of the time, and so it's just taken me a while to get through this trilogy she originally wrote several years ago. But I did finally read this, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it did its job. It was very sweet and fun, and there was a cute romance going on, and that was exciting. There's also some dramatic highwayman-esque things going on, so I guess I should give you a brief synopsis of this book. This follows Lucy Abbott, who, as a child, she falls in love with the slightly older boy that lives near her cousin's home, Rosewood. However, he ends up turning her down and breaking her heart. Then, a few years later, she ends up deciding to go back to Rosewood on her own. Her parents won't let her, so she decides to sneak away, and on her way, she ends up coming across a set of highwaymen, and one of them ends up pulling her away from the trouble, and she finds she actually might know this highwayman, and that's where her adventure really starts. And it's just a great, sweet romance. I will say some negative or cons or whatever, however you want to describe it. The writing in this is not Ashtyn's best, which this is one of her earlier works, and I know she published this through an independent publishing local company, and I believe something about, I don't know, the copyright, she's able to have it again now or something. I don't know exactly what happened, but she now self-publishes, and she decided to rewrite these original 3 books now that she is able to, and then re-release them via Amazon. And so, you know, I think she would completely agree that her writing in this is not the best. I will also say I felt like the main character, it was hard to understand what she was really like, because I think she ends up making decisions or having thoughts that are kind of convenient to the storytelling, if that makes sense, where it's not like she has a firm personality necessarily. It's more like she just does things and thinks things to increase tension and stuff like that. And so that kind of was a little bit hard to get into. There's also, this is a totally personal thing, but part of what I love about historical fiction and part of what I look for in historical fiction is the exploration of society's expectations and just cultural beliefs and understandings of the time and how they influence people in the story. And I feel like the author picked and chose what she wanted to keep in the story, what she wanted to play a role, and when she wanted it to play a role, and then other things she just kind of ignored the fact that certain actions and things would not have been appropriate at all at this time. And so that's something where I know a lot of historical fiction, especially romantic historical fiction like this, will kind of ignore some of the social customs just to kind of create a good story. It's not as concerned with being historically accurate, so to speak. And not everybody's going to be bugged by that. That's definitely a very personal thing to me, but it is something that I did notice, and it did a little bit bother me, but again, that's totally personal. If you like your proper romances and don't really care how historically accurate they are, this is still really cute. I would maybe wait until she re-releases it on Amazon, like I said, so that you can get the most up-to-date version of the story. I wouldn't mind revisiting these books after she's gone through them and cleaned them up a little bit. So anyway, it was great. It was fun. It did just what I needed to do, especially being sick. It was just perfect, a perfect light read for me, and I'm really glad I read it. Next, I have another reread, and that was Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I won't spend too much time on this because I do have a super long vlog that will be coming soon, focused solely on my reading of this, but I will say I really loved this revisiting. I loved deeply annotating it and marking it up, as you can see some of the colors there. Hardy's writing is incredible and his plotting is so well done. I definitely was able to appreciate his foreshadowing skill, his skill in symbolism, and I absolutely love this book, and I'm just so glad I reread it, and especially that I reread it in this way where I was really going deep into it. I definitely want to do a similar thing in the future with some of my other favorite books. I think that will be great. It will probably be a while before I do that. I've been really wanting to revisit Little Women, so I may do something like this in December. I have an already annotated version, not annotated by me, but an annotated edition of Little Women that by Louisa May Alcott that I may read in December and then maybe mark up a little bit as well with my own notes. I don't really know, but this was a great experience. And if you have not read this, well, maybe don't start here with Thomas Hardy. I mean, I started here and it worked well for me. So if you like, I will say, if you like tragedies, because this is a tragedy, you could probably start here, but maybe not for everyone, but it is a great book. Then I was also able to complete the audiobook for The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett Graff, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This was incredible, another favorite of the year. This is a nonfiction following the experience of many, I think it was like 85 people that he interviewed or saw recordings of or whatever from the day of 9/11 in America, and it was just so heart-wrenching. I mean, so basically it goes through different people's experiences. Each person, it's a full cast, the audiobook is, which added even more to the experience. And each will share a few sentences at a time of their experiences from that day. It goes through chronologically everything that happened throughout the day. It does include a few actual recorded audio, so there's some between the air traffic controllers and the planes themselves. There's also a little bit from like President Bush and then President Obama later when Osama bin Laden was killed, but everything in it is firsthand accounts, and it really is just trying to explore this day and everybody's experiences with it, from the old to the young, from all sorts of different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, and just what it was like. And I would just listen to this on my drive to and from work and just cry. I will apologize in case you hear any yard work sounds, because of course, right when I'm filming, they decide to start doing that. Also, you may hear laughing or loudness downstairs because my neighbors decided to just be really obnoxious all of a sudden. So apologize for that. But anyway, let's continue with this. Yes, this audiobook really just moved me so much, and I feel like honestly it is a book that everybody in America should read or listen to at some point, and even outside of America, but particularly in America as it was directly affecting us, obviously. It is heart-wrenching, but also being able to see the miracles and the service that people were doing for one another. It just is so heartwarming. Also confidence building as far as humanity goes, just recognizing how good people really are and can be to each other, even while other people are being terrible. So yes, wonderful, wonderful audiobook, wonderful book. I actually purchased the physical copy as soon as I finished this because I just knew I needed my own copy of this when I will definitely revisit in the future. It was particularly empowering to me because I was only 4 when it occurred, and because of that, I don't really remember anything about it. In fact, I don't remember anything about it. I wasn't in a position where I remember even my parents' reactions, really. So this was really my first time fully exploring everything that happened. And yeah, it was just really, it was difficult to listen to, but also just so well done. And after I finished it, I ended up watching video footage of the day and just torturing myself, because then I continued to cry for like an hour and a half while I watched those. And it was just great. It was just great. I don't know why I do these things to myself, but I do. And the final book I completed this month was Waverley by Sir Walter Scott, which I ended up giving 3 stars. It wasn't great, but it had a lot of positive things about it. So this book follows young Waverley as he is sent off by his uncle and aunt to serve in the army against the Jacobite revolution going on in Scotland at the time. And we see him meet all sorts of different figures in the Scottish Highlands, Lowlands, and it's really kind of an adventure story. However, part of my issue with it was there wasn't actually a lot of description of the action. We mostly jumped over some of the action scenes, and there was a lot more focus on just describing the landscape and describing different people and their actions and their accents and their sort of Scottishness. And while that was all interesting, I just feel like living in the modern day where we are able to look up pictures of a lot of these things and we're able to, watch films and stuff, just having him meet, for example, a Scottish clansman, while exciting, is maybe not as exotic and exciting as it would have been perceived at the time. I could be wrong about that, but I just feel like reading about that isn't as exciting now as it probably used to be. This was early on in the novel, the life of the novel, and I think you can definitely tell because the description of character and the exploration of character is not as well done in this as it is in later books, starting with Jane Austen and then moving forward. There's a lot more description in this of events over dialogue, which I'm more of a dialogue person. I prefer that where I can get it. So that caused a little bit of boredom for me as I was reading. However, I did really like Sir Walter Scott's wit. I felt like his writing style did still have an engaging aspect to it. It wasn't completely boring or dry or anything, just more the plot itself felt that way. But the writing was great and kept me engaged. I also did really like Waverley as a main character. He kind of reminded me a bit of David Copperfield's from Charles Dickens' book of the same name, which I read earlier this year and absolutely loved. So I appreciated that kind of reflection of David Copperfield that was in Waverley. Not the exact same character and by any means, but there were just some tendencies Waverley had, kind of his head in the clouds and different things like that, that reminded me of David Copperfield, which was kind of fun. Like I said, Sir Walter Scott also had great wit in his writing, and it definitely made me laugh out loud a few times. So, I had enjoyable moments reading this, which is why it's a 3 stars. There was enough that I really liked about it that I felt like it was pretty good, but there was also enough I didn't like that I couldn't give it much higher than that. So yeah, that's where I ended up putting it, but I'm glad I finally read it because it's one that's been on my TBR for a very long time. and it's good to finally have it off. Okay, so that is it. That is what I read in July. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, your thoughts on them, as I would love to know. Let me know also what your favorite thing you read in July was, as I would love to know that as well. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful reading week, and I will see you next time.